Leaving behind the killer frost of winter and moving into the rebirth that was spring, Frieren, traveling with her companions, had a lot to think about. The three young wards now charged into her care, Stark, Fern, and Francis, each one talented and capable in their own right, with different skills that they brought to the table. When evaluating how best she could amp their abilities, there were many different avenues that Frieren could take. Out of all of them, Stark would be the most difficult. It was more so about getting up the boy's confidence than anything else. He was more stronger than he gave himself credit. However, he constantly compared himself to his master in Eisen. Because of that, the boy had a tendency to second-guess his decisions, second-guessing his own strength, when time after time he proved that he was more than capable of holding his own. Also, he followed in the way of the warrior and in the battle axe, something that Frieren just wasn't proficient in. If anything, his training simply came from the inward, not the outward, but having good training partners could always improve his own skills. Then next there was Fern, the one of the group she'd known the longest and trained from such a young age. She was almost a spitting image of her. It was startling. And yet, at the same time, despite not having the output of energy that Frieren possessed, Fern had an intensity for learning and the ability to shoot off magic and various spells at a faster clip than even herself, and she had to give her credit. It's why she let her take the forefront whenever they were fighting monsters. She was the quick draw, while Frieren, in terms of magehood, could be considered the following act. And then finally, there was Francis, trying to figure out where he fit into all of this. The son of the boy of whom she had trained and raised, Francis proved to be a jack of all trades. He was skilled in the way of archery, in the way of the sword, and using weapons. You could say that he was the proverbial weapons specialist of the group, able to fit in like a glove to any scenario. If he had to be a helping hand to Fern or Frieren herself, or if he had to be a backup in the terms of battle with the likes of Stark, he was capable of filling out any role that was needed of him. The boy definitely had a lot of bad tendencies though, but that came from years of isolation and training on his own, things that could be ironed out in time. He had a decent propensity for magic, but it wasn't his forte. He still preferred to use hand-to-hand combat or using a weapon if need be. All in all, out of all of her students, it was Francis who was going to need the most work, but that wasn't a bad thing. She planned on having them all work together as a way of improving one another's skills. Iron sharpens iron, as the old proverb says. Along the way, though, the group would meet someone new. As they headed to a small town, Frieren came across a man who was a priestly kind. His name was Cyan. Cyan, being of a priest, was in a bit of a predicament. He found himself stuck in a swamp and was going to drown if it weren't for the assistance of Frieren. After being released and the subsequent snake bite on the part of Stark, forcing them to have to return and get proper healing, they would learn about Cyan's past, learning of how he had dreams of being an adventurer from his older brother, who also served as a priest for the local church. Because of his healing skills and other capabilities, and since it was always good to have a priest in the group, Cyan would be convinced to join them. While he was older than the children, a man in his mid-30s, his age was dwarfed by Frieren, but that was to be expected. She was an elf after all. Still though, he played a good role for the children of the group, oftentimes being the one to settle disputes that Frieren found herself too lazed to want to get involved in, and at times she could be a bit childish herself. Cyan was also familiar with the works of Heater, the priest, and he was someone that he admired, although for Cyan, he had no idea of believing that he'd ever be capable of matching the man that Heater was. Although for Frieren, she believed that he was quite capable, although he did have the bad tendencies that Heater did, and that he had the propensity to not follow the priestly code to the full. All the same though, the group of five now found themselves even stronger as they would continue in their travels. Outside of a few mishaps and misadventures, that being a town that was cursed by a dangerous plant monster that was subsequently putting people to sleep and draining them of their mana, or in the case of dealing with yet another infighting incident when the boys accidentally forgot about Fern's birthday and subsequently had to make it up to her. The group was continuing to grow in their strengths and in their abilities, and for Cyan in question, he got to learn a lot more of the personalities of whom he were traveling with. When it came time to learn about Francis, he learned about the boy's tragic past, what happened to his father. It was one night while they were all gathered around the campfire. Of course, Francis didn't mind sharing this tale about himself, but it wasn't one that he regaled with a lot of enthusiasm. And given how Frieren was connected to it all, out of respect, he tried to keep details to a minimum. "I understand though, priest," Francis would say. "Knowing you, you'll probably tell me about the good book and how I'm supposed to look the other way, turn the other cheek, not seek revenge." "And why would I say something like that? Your father was obviously killed by a bastard. You have every right to want to kill him. I don't blame you, and I don't judge you. That's not my place, kid." Frieren was surprised. "I didn't think that the priestly kind would say such things." "Well, why wouldn't we? Everyone has this misconception about priests. It's so annoying. They always act like we're the most perfect of the perfect, holier than thou. Those type of priests, they're far and few between. Everyone else is just a poser. Of course, you try to live by a code. You try to do the right thing, and you hope and pray to God that when it's all said and done, you've done enough good in this world that there's a decent reward waiting for you on the other side. I'm not perfect, and I'll never claim to be. If I had to go through something like you did, Francis, I wouldn't rest until I killed the son of a bitch that took my father from me. Although there is something else you have to consider." "And what might that be?" Francis asked. "For better or for worse, your father walked the path of a warrior. That's how he lived his life. You don't know fully the circumstances of how your father died. All you know is that you want to confront your father's killer. I'm not saying that you can't, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't. But at the same time, there is something you need to consider as a possibility. If your father died in honorable combat, will you still seek vengeance?" "What are you talking about?" "Honorable combat, a duel between warriors. In a situation like that, when two people fight, knowing that their lives are on the line, do you really think it'd be honorable to seek vengeance in such a case?" "What are you even saying? How wouldn't I know? He killed, yes, this man in green, this swordsman. He killed your father, yes, but he also brought him back to his home and buried him. He didn't leave him to die in some random wilderness or cave or some godforsaken land. He brought him home. I believe that was out of a show of respect. It doesn't matter. I still have to avenge him. I can't just let it go. Understandable. Again, it's not my place to judge. If you want to go after him and seek revenge, then by all means, that is your right. All I'm saying is, if you were to learn a new truth about your father's passing, will it change how you plan to handle the situation? Or are you still going to go about it the same way? And know this, if your father was killed in honorable combat but you seek vengeance, that's something you can't come back from. You will be the one who have taken a life in vain, and you alone will have to bear that guilt. Frieren said nothing at this. Honestly, she'd never considered that possibility. And for all her years, for all of her wisdom, she should have known better. She never thought to consider the possibility that perhaps the boy that she had raised simply died in honorable combat. Of course, it wasn't something she would have preferred. Of course not. But at the same time, could she really be mad in that case? As much as the anger welled up inside of her, in the end of the day, until they knew the truth, until they knew everything that happened, why he left, who he faced, they'd only be left with more questions than answers. That's why getting to heaven was very apparent for them, in order to learn the truth, once and for all. While continuing on in their journeys, the group of 5 would eventually arrive to a country that was ruled by a king. Of course, at first glance, the king took note of the group. In particular, took note of Stark. The reason being was for the boy's resemblance, how he looked. The king in question wanted to use Stark for a very important assignment, that being the art of posing. You see, the king of this land had a son who tragically passed away in battle. However, his son in question, he had served in the army of the king, one of whom that people gladly followed and respected. While his village was going through a troublesome time, the son was looked to as a form of hope, someone that inspired the people to fight on. If they had learned of his death, then perhaps that would be the end. Would they succumb to the army of monsters? Right now, the campaign raged on, but they still needed to show a sign of good faith. That's where Stark came in. He would pose as the king's elder son who passed away, pretending to be him, returning from battle, scarred but alive. The ruse would go on for 3 months, but they would be rewarded for their troubles. In the meantime, Stark had to learn how to pose as the king's son. While he seemed cold and at a distance, Stark knew all too well the emotion that the king was dwelling within him. In the meantime, Francis would continue on in his own private training, attempting to master the way of the bow and improve in the way of the sword. Of course, for Frieren, learning that they were getting paid well, almost a year's worth in terms of money that they could use for supplies, was a done deal, and they got snacks. And on top of that, the potential to gain a new grimoire to her collection. Of course, though, The king had yet another son, one much younger, not ready to take the throne. Stark saw a lot of himself in the boy, especially how the father treated him. It wasn't lost on him that the father, when he looked at Stark, saw his own son. Even so, when the mission came to an end, he even offered for Stark to stay there as a place of refuge. But Stark knew the reason why. Why he wanted him to stay? Because he reminded him so much of his son, it almost felt like he was being gifted a second chance. What the king hadn't told Stark was that the last time he spoke to his real son alive, they had an argument. A petty disagreement. It honestly should have amounted to nothing, but yet things were said. Things that could not easily be taken back. There are many things that a father should never say to his child, among them all being that, "I wish I never saw you again." He didn't mean it, not a single word of it, but yet his pride and his ego got in the way. He couldn't bring himself to say sorry, to ask for forgiveness, to say such a wicked and horrible thing. And you hold your son's dead body in your hands. Those moments, they start to run through your mind. You begin to ask yourself, what were his final thoughts? Did he know that his father loved him? Or did he truly believe that his father never wanted to see him again? Was that on his mind as he fought? Did he throw caution to the wind because he thought his father wouldn't care? If only you could say things differently. If only you could do things differently. And yet so often in life you never get the chance to. For Stark, he knew that feeling. He and Master Eisen did not leave things off on the best of terms. There was a reason why Frieren and Frieren had to go and find him. He had left Eisen a while ago. They had a disagreement as well. And honestly, Stark knew that he couldn't leave things the way they were either. And that was why he couldn't stay. He promised he'd return and tell his master everything he'd experienced. As such, his journey couldn't stop there. But even while doing so, at the very least, the king, even in the loss of his first son, instead of dwelling on only the pain that the loss caused him, he focused on what he still had. There was still a younger son that needed him. Rather than pointing out every flaw, trying to find him as a disappointment, trying to measure him up to someone else, he viewed him for who he was and accepted him. And for Stark, that made him more than happy. As the five would leave from the countryside, rewarded and ready to go through the next leg of their journey, they wondered what would await them. This new group that had been formed. As they continued to grow, they knew that whatever they'd have to face, whatever lied ahead of them, they would overcome it together. Of course, though, things do not always go as one may hope or expect. Oftentimes, you take the unbeaten path, and you find yourself trapped in a land between reality and illusion. At least, that's what Stark wondered. Because they were supposed to be in a forest in the middle of nowhere. So why was there a large circus tent in the middle of the forest? The sounds of jubilation and parading could be heard. The sounds of roaring crowds, cheering fans, wild animals, as they made their way closer and closer to the large circus tent that loomed in the center of the forest. Come one, come all. A fantastic show of wonder now awaits you. All stand in attendance. The ringmaster and his crusading circus now take center stage. Prepare to be dazzled, amazed, mystified beyond your wildest dreams. This concludes Frieren, the Elf and the Archer, What If Frieren Trained Hawkeye, Season 1, Part 6. Guys, I do want to make a quick apology. I don't know how it's going to come through in the audio officially. I probably sound a little different. That's because I'm coming off of a massive head cold. Been congested almost all weekend. Felt a lot better today for recording, and I wanted to get this video out. It's probably going to be getting out a little later than usual. Hoping to feel better tomorrow. So if you're wondering why there wasn't a lot of dialogue in today's video and why it was mostly summary, that's the main reason. So I know that the new character for the Frieren series, the priest, I hope I didn't butcher his name. I think it was Cyan or Cian. I'll try to figure out how to pronounce it better for next time. If I pronounce it horribly, I do apologize, like, for real. Trying to get over this head cold, making some good progress. I feel a lot better today. So hopefully things will be much better for tomorrow and moving forward. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Hit that bell for post notifications, and stay tuned for tomorrow as we continue with What If Frieren Trained Hawkeye, Season 1, Part 7. But that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington signing off, and I'll see you next time.